Hello there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Aaron Bastani and Baroness Jacqueline Foster remains alongside me. Now, there is one last story I want to discuss with you before we bid farewell for the evening. Now, we know the story of Chris Kaba. We know the story of the firearms officer that, of course, was charged with murder but then found not guilty. Well, talking again about whether or not there should be more protection, if you would like, afforded to firearms officers. Yvette Cooper talking about reviews and so on and so forth. Let's cut to the chase. Where are you on this, Jacqueline?
Well, in this particular case, I think the firearms officers are absolutely phenomenal. They do the most marvellous job in protecting us. And you'll speak to many of them, and in their entire career, they've never really had to use their firearm. So they're using this firearm very sparingly. In this particular case, I think the officer was hung out to dry. I think there was political influence. Really from the beginning because of the outcry of what had happened. The fact then he eventually was named, I thought was absolutely appalling, and notwithstanding the decision by the Crown Prosecution Service to actually take this to trial. Well, the whole anonymity issue is very important because this officer, for example, I think the children were taken out of school, the effect on the families, notwithstanding that the jury came to a correct decision. So I think this is a real tough one, but they need our protection. And if we don't do that, we're going to have even more of them leaving the service.
Well, Yvette Cooper's announcement would basically mean that these people would be given anonymity unless they are convicted. I would certainly agree with that. Aaron Bastani.
That seems like a really sensible proposal. I think most people watching and listening can remember the London Bridge attacks, where you had rapid response firearms units turn up and save many people's lives, I suspect. Yeah. And that really brings into sharp relief how important these people can be. And that happens relatively regularly in a city the size of London. What I would say is I disagree in so much. I think it's good it went to court. I think that's good. And I think it's good it went to a jury and the jury found him not guilty because I think that... Because it gives confidence in the justice system and we need that.
No, but in this case...
And he was found not guilty.
Of course you've got to go through a justice system.
By a jury of his peers.
But
and I think that's really important.
They also have their own police independent investigators. And they knew...
You need to let me finish. Because I'm trying to make the whole point. I'm trying to make the whole point. We've obviously seen some footage of him since then, Chris Kaba, not particularly savoury or nice individual by the looks of things.
Whoa there. You're going to get in trouble because before... I want to let you finish your point as well, but you're going to get in trouble, right? Let me tell you for why. Because I think he was about to explain some stuff about Chris Kaba.
No, I won't say anything else.
No. Look at this MP today. Look what she had to say. This is Kim Johnson. Listen.
The media are using racist gang tropes to justify the killing of Chris Kaba. 1,900 people have died in police custody since 1990. The police do have protections. You know, we know that our black communities are over-policed and under-supported. So can the Home Secretary give us assurances that we and our communities are kept safe and that extra protections are not given to the police because they already have the protections they need?
So I interrupted your tongue-in-cheek there because I feel that you were about to state some actual facts.
So, I would let the cat out of the bag. Obviously, there was all sorts of, because of the way our justice system works, all sorts of information regarding Chris Kaba was released after this verdict came out from the jury.
Facts.
And he's not particularly nice person. He's done some very bad things. Of course, that doesn't mean that he should be executed on the street, but that's not what happened. Well, there's a big distance, right, between murder, which was what this charge was, he's found not guilty, and should a police officer be engaged in an extrajudicial killing of somebody who was unarmed. Chris Kaba wasn't armed. Really important to say that.
Well, hold on. He didn't have a gun in his hand, but some would argue that having your foot on the accelerator of a very heavy car and driving that towards people is a weapon of sorts.
But that's why the officer was found not guilty, right?
It is. It's 1.5 tons of an Audi.
No, of course, but that's why the officer was found not guilty. I think if a police officer shoots somebody who's unarmed, I think it's perfectly sensible to say, OK, well, what's happened here? And I genuinely think that is a positive thing about British justice. This went to a jury trial. The officer's been found not guilty. The issue is him being named and the implications it's had for his private life. And I think that's what Yvette Cooper's commenting on. And I think it's a very positive contribution.
There's another case that's run parallel in a way, and it's gone into the public domain. The officer was not named. He had to shoot a person, an adult in a house where the children were obviously in danger. And, that wasn't all over everywhere. But in this case, where my concern is in cases like this, I mean, I do not believe every black person watching this programme thinks that he was given a raw deal, Chris Kaba. I think that the majority of people understand what happened.
Well,
They want proper justice. But, some of these people, they don't speak for whole reams of people.
But this is what I found really interesting, and this is why I interrupted
you. And they're using it like an excuse, which I find is not acceptable. This
notion from that MP there, that people are giving, quote, racist gang tropes.
Yeah.
If somebody is a gangster with a rap sheet longer than my arm, starting when they are 13 and they are an absolute wrong-un, it is not a racist gang trope to say that. When people shoot people, it's not tropes doing the shooting, is it? Words fail me. Look, let's talk, shall we? This topic really gets everyone going, doesn't it? The amount of money that we spend on overseas aid, is it enough? Is it too much? What should be incorporated as part of that? And so on and so forth. Also, when it comes to the budget, there is a lot of speculation as to what is going to be included in that. Well, now, it seems that the Labour Party are planning to slash the amount of money that we spend on overseas aid. I've got to say, a lot of people will say, well, that makes common sense, but I have to say, it's only really because of the eye-watering amount of money that we're currently spending on our asylum system. It's an absolute fortune. In the last financial year, it was over £4 billion. Jacqueline Foster, where are you on some of this?
Well, I'd support the Labour Party on this. I've always believed that the budget for overseas aid is too big. I spent 5 years, when I was an MEP years ago, I spent 5 years on the Africa, Caribbean, Pacific Joint Parliamentary Assembly, apart from other delegations. We ploughed millions into these countries, and a lot of it went to waste.
Aaron Bastani, your thoughts?
We should clip that first bit up. I agree with Labour.
I was about to say that.
That'd be a bit naughty, wouldn't it? No, but it's good. It's good if people can agree across party divides. That's excellent. What I'd say is one thing, which is this. And, of course, we've got the budget coming up on the 30th. Right now, the debt interest payments that the UK is paying for its public debt are about £114 billion a year. It's about 10% of overall government spend. It was 5% in 2019. So we are spending more than 50 billion more on the interest than we were before COVID. Mm-hmm. When you look at that, we're spending as much on those interest payments as we are on education. Mm-hmm. Then I think it puts stuff like this into stark relief. There is an argument to say we really cannot afford to be doing what David Cameron would like us to do, which is spend 0.7% of GDP on overseas aid.
I've got to say, your opening sentence where you said you agreed with the Labour Party, I think that was so unexpected. I think you blew your own microphone up then. So I do apologise if anyone had strange sound interruptions. I think it was just the absolute unexpectedness of you saying that you agreed with Labour. What were you saying?
Well, because the thing is, we have soft power and we have soft diplomacy. And we have relations. I mean, we are key within the Commonwealth. Obviously, we head the Commonwealth. And I have no issue when we provide monies that is well spent and going to countries that really need it. The issue I have with many countries where we send aid, apart from corruption and fraud, we've allowed over the decades, in my view, a lot of these governments from really countries that are wealthy with natural resources, if you look at parts of Africa and across the world, to actually get away with absolute murder, frankly. The money goes in, half the time it's funding, local wars and tribal disputes and all of this sort of stuff. And what we see is that a lot of the civilians, the people that should actually be benefiting from this, are living still on $1 a day. I mean, I've been there. I've been to some of these countries, and frankly, it's awful to see. Obviously, they try and do it via projects. And again, if you get proper oversight in projects, then hopefully something will work. But, when we're giving money to China, Syria, we're giving money to countries that aren't actually our friends. And I just think it's unacceptable. So I have no issue with the budget for overseas aid being slashed and going actually to people that need it. And equally, obviously, we've got to tackle the amount of money on illegal immigration.
I've got to say, a lot of people are actually quite upset by this because what they're saying is that current projections suggest it could drop to 0.36% of our GNI. And just to remind you, because I think Aaron was mentioning this a second ago, it was supposed to be 0.7%. So that 0.36% would be the lowest level in 17 years.
Yeah, but put it in pounds, shillings and pence, because we all talk percentages. The public go, well, what's 0.7?
Such a good point.
We're talking about a budget last year of 15 billion, 15,000 million pounds that the British taxpayer is providing in overseas aid. We're not saying that you get rid of all of it, but clearly it is far too much. There are far more pressures where money needs to be spent in this country. By the same token, pensioners, 10 million pensioners have been, going to lose their winter allowance, their winter heating allowance. So it's got to be put in perspective. And I think it's been far too high for far too long, in my view.
But one of the problems is that many people will be quite critical of what they would determine, Aaron, to be populism and some of the attitudes that people have in society at the moment. But there will be an awful lot of people in society now that sit there and feel we do not put British citizens first. So when it comes to the amounts of money that we're talking about at the moment, so we all know by now the winter fuel allowance, that's been taken off people. That was to try and save £1.5 billion. The private schools, you're going to have loads of kids' private school education interrupted again. That's to try and save about, depending on who you believe, about £1.3 billion. The projection of what we spend on the asylum system, it's due to cost £6.4 billion this year. And people will sit there and say, hang on a second, you want to impact all of our lives, you want to make the pensioners cold in the winter, you want to disrupt the kids' schooling, you want to tell everyone else to fasten their belts and raise taxes here, there and everywhere. Tony Blair chipped in today, piping up about charging per mile. Yeah. While simultaneously allowing the asylum budget to spiral to a potential $6 billion odd. What do you say to this?
It's a lot of money, and in Labour's defence, they would say it's too much money and we want to bring it down. I don't think anybody says we should be spending that much money on asylum policy.
Well, why is there not a national emergency being declared?
Well, Labour would say, and I don't know the particulars of the argument, Labour would say that Tory maladministration and the failure on Rwanda has now created this backlog which will have to be dealt with and which will cost a significant amount of money. Just to be clear, that's not necessarily my view. Like I say, I'm not that familiar with the details. That would be the Labour position. But to go back to what Baroness Foster said a moment ago, pounds, shillings and pence, this is really important. £14 billion is a lot of money. It's a huge amount of money. And we should absolutely be funding things like contraception, clean drinking water, maternal health. There are women out there in this world of ours, 8 billion people, who give birth in the dark with no access to electricity, OK? We should obviously be trying as a species to avoid that. But lots of our overseas aid goes towards, quote-unquote, economic development projects, which aren't actually about the bare essentials. It's about building the tourism industry in Ecuador or about building private health clinics in India. India has a space programme, OK?
India has more... what people will be shouting at the screen. You've hit the nail on the head.
India has more billionaires than this country does, right? So if India wants to deal with its huge issues with regards to food deprivation, healthcare, which are massive, right? Hundreds of millions of people are affected. Then Indian billionaires should be the ones dealing with that.
But then, because I think it's appalling that we spend money in countries that are doing the things that you're saying that they're doing, which we all know they're doing with their finances. But the flip side of that is, well, people will say it's soft power, soft power, soft power. We've already heard that today. So what would you say back to that?
So I think soft power is a real thing. And I think Brits don't realise how much soft power this country has, actually. I think you probably should, if you're being smart about it, put more money towards the World Service, more money towards the British Institute. I think you probably should do those sorts of things. But I do think that the idea that soft powers is an outgrowth of giving aid to projects like I just mentioned. I didn't make those up, by the way. Those are real projects.
No, I know.
A luxury hotel in Quito was part of an overseas aid project paid for by the British taxpayer.
Can I just bring it back to the point I made? What we've seen over the decades is the government. These countries all have governments in whatever form. And what they've been allowed to do is actually not take responsibility for their own citizens. And while you've got the West, or you've got the UK or the EU or whoever...
Well, China increasingly, right?
Putting in funds all the time. If you just take China out of it for this, for a minute, what are their governments doing? Because what we then see, we've got wars all over Africa and various places. We've got massive Russian and Chinese influence now because some of these places have been decimated. These are countries, they've got some of the most wonderful natural resources that, if they were used properly, whether it's oil or whether it's diamond or whatever it is, wood, they've got all sorts of natural resources. And the profits from any of that never go to the people that live there. Because of, I was in Nigeria at one stage, and they, I think, created about 10 billion a year from oil revenue, and less than 1 billion were going to the population.
Well, there you go. You know, the viewers, I knew you'd be doing this at home. When you were talking, the viewers were getting in touch saying almost identical things to what you're saying. Michelle, please, can someone point out that some of these countries that we give cash to have space programmes and so on and so forth?
It's true.
How did I know that you guys would be thinking that at home? Jerry says, Michelle, this is very simple. All foreign aid should be stopped. Or there'll be a lot of people that push back on that.
I disagree with that.
Georgia, she's got in touch and said, cool, blimey, I finally found a Labour policy that I agree with. There you go. I know, you see, what can we say? Look, there's lots